Five Laps at Freddy's, what is essentially the Mario Kart of the FNAF franchise, just released a few days ago, and within it is an entire track dedicated to the Midnight Motorist minigame from FNAF Pizzeria Simulator, along with a car that's literally titled Midnight Motor. Now, Midnight Motorist, as many of you know, is obviously the most confusing minigame in all of FNAF in most people's eyes. But does Five Laps at Freddy's finally offer some clarification, perhaps some theory confirmation, or does it just murky up the waters even more? What I find to be most interesting about the FLAF demo is the 3D perspective we get on the locations and setting of the infamous 8-bit minigame called Midnight Motorist. We get to see redone versions of Junior's The Mound of Dirt, and you can even see the house off in the distance during a certain segment of the raceway. Now, admittedly, the racetrack doesn't offer much in the way of new as far as lore implications go for the original minigame. It is mostly just a raceway chock full of Easter eggs and callbacks to Midnight Motorist's first appearance back in FNAF 6. I will say though, if it wasn't already most likely before, the mound of dirt is most definitely an unmarked gravesite of some kind. That definitely looks like the stereotypical depiction of a body buried just beneath the surface, at least to me. What has really caused the stir in the theorist community is the car that goes along with the racetrack, a purple vehicle simply called Midnight Motor. What makes this vehicle of high interest is a little decor thing. Please excuse my ignorance as to what it's actually called. My literacy when it comes to matters concerning cars and vehicles is next to none, which shows a yellow rabbit head on top of it. This realistically can't be representing any other animatronic character besides Spring Bonnie, and what makes that one special is that it is the suit William Afton used to lure and murder kids, as well as the one he got spring locked in later on. Basically, Spring Bonnie and William Afton are now synonymous with one another. What this small little decoration has done is added to the heated debate of Afton versus non-Afton believers when it comes to the protagonist of the Midnight Motorist game. This yellow fellow is considered by many to be Afton himself, while many think he is a different person and that the minigame centers around a different family entirely. While the exact identity differs, this video is just going to deal with the two sides of Afton versus not Afton. There's at the very least narrative evidence on both sides of this debate, something I talked about at greater length in a previous video, where I discussed how there's so many branching webs of possibility and prior theory dependent beliefs that it is nearly impossible to have a one universal answer for mysteries like these. However, for many of you who have seen the purple car in 5 laps, this debate has finally been put to rest as they believe the presence of a Spring Bonnie head on the purple car is confirmation that the driver is William Afton himself. Just the fact that the car is purple was confirmation for many people long ago, as we see Afton drive a purple car when he murders Charlie way back in FNAF 2. With the combination of the purple car and a Spring Bonnie presence, symbolic evidence really seems to be swaying towards the Afton side, and I wanted to talk about specifically why that is. This video isn't meant to be a solves all kind of video. If you watched my aforementioned episode on Midnight Motorist, you'll know how unlikely I find it to be that a singular universal answer is truly attainable for something like this, but it is meant to clarify why so many people find this singular image to be confirmation of the Afton theory. The bulk of it relies upon the fact that FNAF is a fictitious universe and relies on storytelling methods to communicate its lore. In real life, attacking an investigation from all angles, no matter how unlikely, is a good idea if not necessary to solve something. What complicates real life so much is the fact that it is rife with coincidences, accidents, and meaningless information. Sorting through all the noise to get to the truth of a situation is difficult due to so many factors being present, and most of them ultimately not mattering or being actively misleading. Storylines work a little bit differently, though. While I am a huge fan and promoter of viewing fictional universes as living, breathing worlds, for the fun of the immersive nature that comes along with it at least, when we get down to theorizing, there's an important difference from real life that I think needs to be considered when interpreting information. Everything you are consuming is a conscious decision of some kind. Sure, mistakes can happen here and there, but the vast majority of a fictional story, whether it be written by one or multiple authors, consists of hundreds of carefully made decisions, including narrative devices and thematic representations. I think you can probably see what I'm getting at now. Many people who hold on to Midnight Motorist being about a family separate from the Aftons are providing alternative routes of reasoning as to why a Spring Bonnie head has been associated with the Midnight Motor car, and in real life, many of those could feasibly be possible. What if the owner of the car was just a fan of Spring Bonnie? What if it's just a semi-relevant decoration? Heck, this could have originally been Afton's car, then someone else bought it off of him or something. There are many ways that aren't technically impossible to force a detail to be irrelevant or purposely misleading. But the problem is, no matter what conclusion is drawn, details like this are very purposely placed there by someone involved in the creation of the game, just as elements are carefully placed in any fictitious story. Coincidence should not be assumed when narrative significance can be applied. And with the past few years of debates surrounding Midnight Motorist, specifically around whether or not it centers around Afton, it feels weird that a detail like this would be trivial. Even if it is a red herring, whoever put it there had to have known what they were doing and what it would mean to some people. While Scott Cawthon and the FNAF franchise as a whole thrives off ambiguity and cryptic storytelling, it feels a little rash to assign something as being a complete and deliberate misdirection whose only purpose is to mislead people. I definitely believe Scott likes to confuse people, but there's a difference between creating confusion and straight up pointing people in the wrong direction, especially when it comes to clarification in much older parts of the timeline. There is no way that the insertion of a detail like this would be believed to not signify something to the fanbase, and what is certainly the most simple and logical chain of connections is that Spring Bonnie relates to William Afton, and now the both of them relate to the purple car, which relates heavily to Midnight Motorist. All of this is to say that details and narrative clues are almost never coincidental, and that fictional stories as a whole have a human puppet master behind the scenes directing the plot beats, foreshadowing, and clues found within. And what's crazy here is I'm not even necessarily staking my flag in the ground for Yellow Guy 100% being William Afton. I'm just expressing how it becomes harder and harder to believe that Midnight Motorist isn't intrinsically connected to the Aftons given the specific clues surrounding it. I'm not saying you are in the wrong if you are a theorist arguing for a non-Afton interpretation, but what I am saying is your position now requires a lot of work and carefully thought out evidence presentation to defend, not only containing self-contained evidence for the theory, but also counter-evidence or logically and narratively sound explanations as to why so many Afton-esque clues surround Midnight Motorist as a whole if the playable character is not William. The overall takeaway of this video is that at the end of the day, FNAF has to be viewed as a story, and therefore thematic or correlative evidence should not be ignored and instead should be factored into a reasonable degree to whatever side of any theory you are arguing for. In my opinion, Midnight Motorist is the single most confusing part of FNAF, and while I don't believe I've said this on the channel, I've expressed it numerous times to the people I converse with in real life. It feels very similar to that sequence at the end of the Petscop soundtrack video, in that both of these are short-lived moments that are frustratingly hard to factor into the bigger picture. Both of them have felt to me to be very nearly impossible to fit into any interpretation whilst being part of a flawless theory, and while on the one hand that is what makes them so exciting to theorize about, it also makes them aggravating the more you puzzle over them. But what are your thoughts? Is Midnight Motorist definitely about the Aftons? Is it not, and for a good reason? Leave any of your theories surrounding the minigame in the comments below, as I love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, the unknown persists, so the investigation continues.